There is a conversation happening in the most ancient centers of Jewish mystical learning, in the study halls of Safed, in the writings of the Kabbalists, in the oral traditions passed from rabbi to student across centuries, about something that most people in the modern world would dismiss as superstition. And I want to challenge you, before we go any further, to hold your skepticism lightly. Not to abandon it, but to carry it loosely. Because what I am about to share with you is not superstition dressed up as wisdom. It is wisdom that has been mistaken for superstition by a culture that forgot how to read it. The question is this: can a color block wealth? Not metaphorically, not as a vague feel-good principle about positive thinking, but in a concrete, practical, energetically measurable way. Can the color you choose for your walls, your furniture, your front door, your bedroom, your kitchen actually affect your capacity to earn, attract, and hold on to money? The answer from the Jewish mystical tradition, from Kabbalah, from the teachings of the great rabbinical sages, from the synthesis of ancient Hebrew wisdom with the practical science of how human beings actually inhabit space, is yes, absolutely yes. And the reasoning behind that answer is far more sophisticated than you might expect. Let me begin at the beginning. The Hebrew word for color is tseva, and it shares a root with the word tzvi, which means beauty, glory, splendor. In the Hebrew understanding of reality, color is not a cosmetic quality of objects. It is not merely how things appear, it is a dimension of their essence. The colors that surround you are not decorations. They are communications, messages being sent continuously to your nervous system, your subconscious mind, your spiritual field, and your energetic body. Whether you are consciously receiving those messages or not, they are arriving, and they are shaping your reality in ways both subtle and profound. This is not mysticism divorced from science. Modern neuroscience has documented extensively that color has measurable, reproducible effects on human physiology and psychology. Different colors activate different parts of the brain. They affect cortisol levels, which is the primary stress hormone. They affect heart rate, blood pressure, and respiratory pattern. They affect decision-making, the speed of decisions, the risk tolerance of decisions, the emotional content of decisions. Color is not neutral. It never was. And the ancient sages understood this long before the neuroscientists had the instruments to measure it. In the Kabbalistic framework, color is understood through the lens of the Sephirot, the 10 divine emanations that, in mystical theology, represent the 10 fundamental qualities or energies through which the infinite creates and sustains the finite world. Each sephira has a color correspondence. Each color carries a specific energetic signature that resonates with particular qualities of experience: love, judgment, wisdom, understanding, beauty, endurance, eternity, foundation, and sovereignty. And it is within this framework that we encounter the central teaching of today's conversation, the color that the rabbinical tradition consistently identifies as the most dangerous color to have in the home of someone who wants to build and sustain wealth. The color that, more than any other, creates what the mystics call a klipa, a shell or husk, a blockage around the flow of abundance. That color is black, not as an accent, not as a line, a border, an outline, but as a dominant color, as the primary color of walls, of major furniture pieces, of the living spaces where you spend the most time. Black as a governing energy in the home. Before I explain the mystical and psychological reasoning behind this teaching, I want to be clear about what this is not saying. It is not saying that black is evil. It is not saying that wearing black clothing makes you poor. It is not making any kind of moral judgment about darkness or light in the simplistic sense. The tradition is far too sophisticated for that. What it is saying is that black, as a dominant energetic presence in a living space, creates specific conditions that are fundamentally hostile to the movement, flow, and accumulation of wealth. To understand why, you need to understand how the tradition thinks about wealth itself. In the Kabbalistic framework, wealth is not primarily a material phenomenon. It is an energetic one. The Hebrew word for wealth is osher, and it is deeply connected to the concept of ashray, which is usually translated as happiness or blessedness, but literally means something closer to flowing forward, on the move, in motion toward flourishing. Wealth in this understanding is not a static accumulation, it is a dynamic flow. Money is meant to move, to circulate, to generate, to multiply, to return. The person who builds genuine wealth is not the one who hoards, but the one who participates skillfully in the movement of value through the world. Now think about what black does, energetically and psychologically, to a space. Black absorbs. It takes in all wavelengths of light and releases none. It is, by definition, the end of the spectrum, the point at which light ceases to travel. A room dominated by black is a room from which light cannot escape. And if we understand wealth as a form of energy that, like light, is meant to flow and circulate, then we begin to understand why the tradition warns so strongly against surrounding yourself with the energy of absorption without release. The rabbinical teaching is that a home should breathe. It should have what the mystical tradition calls ruach, breath, wind, spirit, movement. The energy of a space should be dynamic and circulating, not static and contained. And black, as a dominant color, creates stasis. It creates weight. It creates the energetic equivalent of a sealed container. And a sealed container, no matter how much you put into it, cannot grow, cannot multiply, cannot participate in the dynamic exchange that is the essential nature of abundance. There is a passage in the Zohar, the central text of Jewish mysticism, compiled in the 13th century but drawing on traditions far older, that speaks of the kelipot, the shells or husks that block the flow of divine light into the world. The Zohar describes these blockages not as evil in themselves, but as the natural result of enclosure, of light that has been trapped, of energy that has been sealed off from its source. The klipa is not the opposite of the divine. It is the divine in a state of contraction, unable to radiate, unable to give, unable to participate in the flowing abundance that is the natural state of the universe. Black, in the dominant form that the rabbis warn against, is a visual and energetic representation of klipa. It is the color of contraction, of closure, of sealed potential that cannot radiate outward. And the consequence of surrounding yourself with this energy, the consequence of living and working daily in spaces dominated by this color, is that you absorb its quality into your own psychological and energetic field. You begin to think in terms of contraction rather than expansion. Your financial decisions become defensive rather than generative. Your relationship with money becomes about holding on rather than flowing forward. You accumulate anxiety around wealth rather than the creative confidence that attracts it. Now I want to bring this down from the mystical and into the practical, because the tradition never meant for these teachings to be merely philosophical. They were always intended to be lived. They were always instructions for how to arrange your physical environment in a way that supports your spiritual and material flourishing. Let me walk you through the specific teachings about color and space that emerge from the rabbinical and Kabbalistic tradition and show you how they map onto what modern environmental psychology has independently confirmed. The first teaching concerns the entry of the home, the front door, the foyer, the first space that a visitor encounters when they enter your house. In the mystical tradition, the entrance of a home is a threshold between the outer world and the inner world. It is the point at which the energy of the street, which is often chaotic, competitive, and exhausting, either enters and dominates the home or is transformed and redirected by the quality of the space it encounters. The rabbis teach that the entrance of a home should radiate what they call hidur, beauty, elevation, grace. It should communicate to anyone who crosses the threshold and to the energy of the universe itself that this is a place of welcome, warmth, and abundance. It should be inviting. It should draw energy in and then transform it, the way a good host transforms a tired traveler by receiving them with warmth and generosity. A front door painted black, which has become enormously fashionable in contemporary interior design, does the opposite of this according to the tradition. It communicates closure. It signals that the people inside are unavailable, sealed off, unwilling to receive. It creates, at the very point of entry, an energetic barrier that blocks the flow of abundance into the home. Modern real estate research has confirmed, from a completely different angle, that front door color has a measurable effect on how potential buyers perceive the value and welcoming quality of a home. Black front doors, while aesthetically dramatic, consistently test as less welcoming and less inviting than doors in warm, vibrant colors. The tradition and the science arrive at the same place from different directions. The second teaching concerns the bedroom, specifically the colors of the walls and the dominant tones of the bed linens and furnishings. In the Kabbalistic framework, the bedroom is the domain of Yesod, the ninth sephira, which governs the foundational energies of intimacy, generation, creativity, and the flow between the spiritual and the material. Yesod is the channel through which the abundance of the higher sephirot flows down into the manifest world. It is, in the most literal sense, the energetic root of material prosperity. And the color correspondence of Yesod is not black. It is not gray. It is not the cold, sealed tones of contraction. It is a warm, generative, fertile tone, the color of foundation, of deep earth, of creative potential ready to manifest. A bedroom dominated by black walls, black headboard, black linens, is a bedroom in which the energy of generation and flow has been suppressed. The bed, which in the mystical tradition is the site of the most intimate meeting between the spiritual and the physical, has been enclosed in the color of absorption and stasis. The creative energy of the space, the energy from which all other forms of creation, including financial creation, ultimately flows, has been contained and blocked. The tradition teaches that bedroom colors should be warm without being stimulating, soft without being dull, and above all, they should carry the quality of what the Hebrew calls chiyut, vitality, life force, living energy. Cream, ivory, soft gold, warm white, gentle terracotta. These are the colors that support the energetic quality of Yesod. They create the conditions in which the generative power of the home can work freely. The third teaching concerns the kitchen and the dining room, the spaces associated with nourishment, with the physical act of sustaining life, with the daily miracle of turning raw material into something that feeds and delights. In the Kabbalistic framework, these spaces correspond to the sephira of Chesed, loving kindness, generosity, the overflowing abundance that gives without holding back. Chesed is the quality that the tradition most directly associates with material prosperity, not in the sense of greed or acquisition, but in the sense of the confidence and generosity that characterizes the person who understands that abundance is not finite, that giving does not diminish, but multiplies, that the more freely energy moves through your life, the more it accumulates and returns. And the colors of Chesed are expansive. They are warm, bright, generous in their luminosity. They are the colors of fire that gives heat without asking for permission, of gold that catches and redistributes light, of the deep, rich blues and azures that in the biblical tradition represented the divine presence itself, the color of the sky at noon, of the sea at its most generative depth. A kitchen dominated by black is a kitchen in which the energy of nourishment has been suppressed. The space that should be most associated with the flowing generosity of Chesed has been closed down, contracted, sealed. The daily ritual of preparation and sharing, which in the tradition is one of the primary physical channels through which abundance enters the home, has been surrounded by the energy of endings rather than beginnings. Now I want to address an objection that I know many of you are carrying, because it is the same objection that materialist culture has trained all of us to carry when we encounter teachings like this. The objection is, this is all very poetic, but is there any real mechanism by which the color of my walls could possibly affect my financial life? Are we not just talking about aesthetics? The answer begins with a question in return. What do you think your financial decisions are made of? Every financial decision you will ever make, every investment you consider, every opportunity you evaluate, every negotiation you engage in, every risk you take or decline to take, is made by a human, nervous system that has been conditioned by its environment over years and decades. The person who makes those decisions is not a rational calculator in a vacuum. They are a biological organism that has been shaped continuously and cumulatively by the quality of the spaces they inhabit. If you spend most of your waking hours in spaces that communicate contraction, weight, closure, and the end of flow, You will tend, without being consciously aware of it, to make decisions that reflect those qualities. You will tend toward defensive financial behavior. You will tend to see opportunities through the lens of risk rather than possibility. You will tend to protect rather than generate. And over time, the cumulative effect of those tendencies on your actual financial outcomes is not small. This is not mysticism. This is environmental psychology. The field of environmental psychology has documented extensively that the physical spaces we inhabit have measurable, reproducible effects on our cognitive state, our emotional state, our creative capacity, and our decision-making quality. The lighting, the temperature, the acoustic quality, the spatial arrangement, the proportion of surfaces, and yes, the colors of the spaces we spend our lives in all contribute to the neurological and psychological state in which we operate. And the connection to the Kabbalistic tradition is not incidental. The rabbis who developed these teachings were, in their own idiom and with their own conceptual tools, making exactly the same observation that environmental psychologists make today. Your environment shapes you, not just your opinions about your environment itself. The quality of the space you inhabit becomes, over time, the quality of the mind you bring to every challenge and opportunity in your life. Let me now turn to the specific substitute colors that the tradition recommends. The colors that, according to the rabbinical and Kabbalistic teachings, actively support the flow of wealth and the accumulation of abundance. The first and most consistently praised color in the tradition for prosperity is gold. Not necessarily literal gold paint on the walls, but the quality of warm, luminous, generative yellow. Gold in the biblical tradition is the color of divine glory, the material used in the construction of the temple in Jerusalem, the color of the menorah, the color of the priestly vestments. Gold is the color of light made manifest, of spiritual radiance translated into physical form. In the modern environmental psychology literature, warm yellows and golds have been shown to activate the brain's reward circuitry, to increase feelings of optimism and possibility, and to support the kind of creative, expansive thinking that underlies good entrepreneurial and investment decision-making. A room with warm gold tones is a room in which the human brain naturally shifts toward opportunity orientation rather than threat orientation. And that shift, compounded over thousands of financial decisions over many years, is worth an extraordinary amount. The second color associated with prosperity in the tradition is what the Hebrews called techelet, a specific shade of blue that was extracted from a Mediterranean sea creature and used to dye the fringes of prayer garments and the fabrics of the tabernacle. This was not ordinary blue. It was a blue of extraordinary depth and luminosity, described in the ancient sources as the color of the sky at its most transparent, the color of the sea at its most generative depth. And it was associated directly with the divine presence, with the quality of infinite overflowing abundance that, in the mystical framework, is the ultimate source of all material prosperity. Modern studies of blue environments are consistent with this teaching. Cool, deep blues have been shown to increase productivity, to support sustained focus and deep concentration, and to create feelings of expansiveness, of possibility that extends beyond the immediate and the ordinary. They are particularly effective in spaces used for creative and intellectual work, which is to say, exactly the kinds of spaces where wealth-generating ideas are born. The third color that the tradition recommends for prosperity is green, specifically the warm, living green of growing things. In the Torah, the flourishing of the land is consistently represented through the image of green abundance, of fields full of grain, of vineyards heavy with fruit, of the fertile earth in its most generative season. Green is the color of chiyut, of living vitality, of the force that drives growth and multiplication. Modern research on green environments confirms this entirely. Natural greens, particularly the warm yellowish greens of living foliage rather than the cold blue greens of synthetic material, have been shown to reduce stress, to increase feelings of vitality and hope, and to support the kind of patient, optimistic, long-term thinking that is essential for building wealth over time. Plants in a space are not just aesthetic, they are energetic partners, living organisms that participate in the dynamic exchange of energy that the tradition calls ruach. The fourth color is white, specifically the warm, luminous white of natural materials like limestone, linen, and natural plaster, rather than the cold, clinical white of synthetic paint. In the Kabbalistic framework, white is associated with Keter, the crown, the highest sephirah, the point of contact between the finite and the infinite. White is the color of pure potential, of undifferentiated possibility, of the divine nothing from which all things emerge. A home with generous amounts of warm white is a home that feels open to possibility. It does not foreclose, it does not seal. It holds space, lightly, generously, for whatever is trying to emerge. And that quality of spacious openness is, in both mystical and psychological terms, one of the fundamental preconditions for the experience of abundance. Now I want to address something that goes beyond color specifically, and speaks to the deeper principle underlying all of these teachings. The tradition does not ultimately separate the material from the spiritual. It does not say, your inner life is spiritual, your home is material, and the two have nothing to do with each other. On the contrary, it insists that the physical environment is a direct expression of the inner life, and that the inner life is constantly being shaped, confirmed, and reinforced by the physical environment in a continuous feedback loop. This means that changing the colors of your home is not a superficial act. It is not decoration, in the dismissive sense that modern culture uses that word. It is an act of intention, a declaration to yourself, to the people who share your space, and to the universe at large, about the quality of life you are choosing to inhabit. When you choose to replace the dominant blacks and heavy darks with the warm golds and living greens and luminous whites that the tradition recommends, you are not just painting walls. You are committing to an energetic quality, to openness over closure, to flow over stasis, to expansion over contraction. And here is the teaching that I want to leave you with, because it is the heart of everything the rabbis were trying to communicate when they warned about the colors that block wealth. The greatest block to wealth is not external. It is not the economy, not your circumstances, not the unfairness of the world. The greatest block to wealth is the internal state of contraction, the fear-based, closed, defensive posture toward life that the mystics called tzimtzum in its negative sense. The universe, in the Kabbalistic understanding, is governed by a single fundamental dynamic, the movement between tzimtzum, divine contraction, withdrawal, making space, and gilui, revelation, expansion, flowing outward. True tzimtzum, the divine version, is not permanent contraction. It is the withdrawal that creates space for others to flourish. It is the generosity that holds back its own fullness so that something new can emerge. But the human version of contraction, the fearful version, the hoarding version, the defensive version, is not generosity. It is paralysis. It is the energetic equivalent of a clenched fist, which can neither give nor receive, and a home dominated by the color of absorption, of sealed potential, of light that enters and never returns. Such a home is a physical representation of that clenched fist. It surrounds you day after day, with a visual and energetic confirmation of the contraction you are trying to escape. The rabbinical warning about black is ultimately a warning about your relationship with flow. It is an invitation to examine, are you living in spaces that confirm your openness to abundance, or spaces that confirm your fear of losing what little you have? Are your walls speaking the language of expansion and welcome, or the language of closure and defense? Because your environment does speak. It speaks continuously in a language beneath words, directly to the parts of your nervous system and your soul that make the decisions that shape your financial life. The question is not whether it is speaking. The question is what you are allowing it to say. Change the color, change the conversation. Let the walls of your home speak the language of gold and living green and luminous white, the language of flow, of welcome, of open hands that can give and receive in equal measure. The tradition promises that when you do this, when you align your physical environment with the energetic quality of abundance, you are not just changing your decor. You are changing your life. This is what the rabbis knew. This is what the Kabbalists encoded in their color teachings. This is what the sages meant when they said that the home is a mikdash me'at, a small sanctuary, a little temple. a place where the quality of the divine presence you choose to cultivate becomes the quality of life you actually live. The color blocking your wealth is the color of your fear. Replace it with the color of your vision, and watch what begins to flow.